Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into something really quite strange and dark. A really horrific chapter from American history.
Yeah, the dance marathons,
Yeah.
particularly those from the early 20th century, right into the Great Depression years.
Exactly. It's a story that, well, it feels almost impossible to imagine happening now. Sort of this bizarre mix of entertainment, sheer endurance.
And just raw human desperation. It really is something else.
Yeah. We're drawing on a great source, a video that really dives into this whole phenomenon. And our goal today is to try and unpack how this could even happen, what it tells us about that time.
And maybe, what it still reveals about human limits, so people consider entertainment, that kind of thing.
Right. So let's get into it.
Okay, so to really get why these dance marathons became what they were, we kind of need to set the scene first. The U.S. went through huge changes in the decades leading up to it.
Yeah, you had the progressive era, right? Late 1800s, early 1900s.
Exactly. A time of massive social, economic, political change. Lots of reform movements pushing for things like labor rights, women getting the vote.
A real push for addressing inequality, but then, bang, World War I.
1914 to 1918 plunged everything into instability, and even after the war ended, it wasn't like instant relief.
No, there was still global economic strain, a lot of stress, despair, even in the U.S.
But then, sort of surprisingly, things pivot. The 1920s arrive. The Roaring Twenties.
Ah, yes. Economic recovery, for some at least, but also this huge cultural shift, like the Great Gatsby kind of vibe, right?
Totally. Fashion exploding, social norms getting much looser, partying, women drinking, breaking away from old traditions, a real sense of release.
And music was huge then.
Oh, absolutely central. The jazz age. Jazz wasn't just music, it felt like freedom. And at dance itself, like tap dance, became massive entertainment.
And interestingly, this was also when endurance sports started getting really popular.
Yeah, not just dancing. Marathon running, cycling, even early triathlons. People were fascinated by pushing the body to its limits.
Why do you think that was?
Well, maybe it was tied to that post-war feeling. A need to show resilience, maybe. Prove toughness after all that global trauma. People really admire that kind of grit, physical and mental.
Okay, so you've got this backdrop. Economic swings, cultural rebellion, jazz, dance mania, and this fascination with endurance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the dance marathon kind of emerges. The source we look at traces the very first one back to San Francisco, sometime in the 1910s.
But the person who really put it on the map was Alma Cummings.
Right, a dance instructor from New York. In 1923, she did something pretty incredible.
She danced for 27 hours straight. That's wow.
Yeah, and the source mentioned she went through 6 partners. They just couldn't keep up with her.
That must have grabbed headlines.
Oh, definitely. It sparked something. Organizers suddenly saw, potential. Events started popping up, and they weren't just for kicks anymore. They started offering real prize money.
Like serious money for the time.
Yeah, like $500, $1,000, even $1,500 in the 20s. That was a fortune for many people back then. Life-changing money. And naturally, rules started developing.
Okay, so it starts out maybe a bit quirky, testing limits, some prize money. But then everything changes drastically. The Roaring Twenties roar right off a cliff.
Yeah, the bottom just falls out. We hit the Great Depression, kicking in hard around 1929. And the source points out it was fueled by all that excessive lending, the huge stock market bubble.
Black Thursday, October 29, 1929, the big crash.
And the economic fallout was just devastating. The U.S. economy basically collapsed. The numbers are hard to wrap your head around. Unemployment hits 24.9%.
Nearly 1 in 4 people out of work.
Yeah. Think about that. Widespread poverty, hunger, people losing everything. You get the Hoovervilles, those shanty towns.
Just images of absolute desperation.
And the psychological toll.
Immense.
Rampant despair, stress. Suicide rates jumped something like 22.8%. Just profound hopelessness across the country.
And here's the really, really weird part. The really dark twist. As the country is sinking into this pit of despair, dance marathons actually get more popular.
Yeah, this is the crucial shift. The whole nature of the event just transforms completely. They stop being these novelty endurance things. For the dancers, they became this desperate, brutal, often incredibly humiliating way to survive.
Survive? How so?
Well, the motivation changed entirely. Yes, winning the prize money was the dream, the ultimate goal. But what actually drew people in, what kept them there day after day?
What was it?
The source highlights it clearly. Guaranteed food, sometimes up to 12 free meals a day, and shelter, a roof over their heads.
So for the unemployed, the homeless, the starving, it wasn't entertainment at all.
Not for them, no. It was literally a lifeline. A way to stay alive, get fed, have somewhere warm to sleep, even if it was just for a couple hours a day on a cot near the dance floor.
And meanwhile, the organizers, the promoters.
Oh, they were making a killing. Huge profits from ticket sales. And they were absolutely exploiting the desperation of the dancers. It was blatant.
And the audience, why were they packing these places?
Well, partly escape, probably. Escaping their own stressful lives during the Depression. But it clearly devolved into something much darker. This perverse live-action spectacle. Watching people suffer.
Like a grim reality show, almost.
Exactly. And the scale could be huge. Even before the absolute worst of the Depression, that 1928 Manhattan event, the source says it averaged 12,000 spectators every day.
12,000 tickets a day. The revenue must have been enormous.
You bet. And the endurance levels were just becoming unbelievable. That Greenville couple who won the 28 event, they danced for 443 hours.
443. That's 19 days, nonstop, basically.
19 days. But then look how the desperation ramps up. That same couple in 1933, right in the depths of the Depression, they broke their own record.
How long did they go for then?
3,780 hours.
Wait, 3,780 hours. That's nearly 5 months.
Almost 5 months on their feet for a $1,000 prize. It just shows the absolute extreme lengths people were driven to.
And it wasn't just that the events got longer as the Depression wore on. They got crueler, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. The rules, the conditions, they became incredibly harsh. Almost like they were designed to maximize the suffering for the audience's entertainment.
What kind of rules?
Mandatory partners, usually male-female, and the rest breaks, cut to the bone. Maybe just 2 hours of sleep allowed per day. Sometimes less.
And getting woken up wasn't pleasant, I imagine.
No. The source mentions loud live bands, these cron bands, blasting music to jolt you back onto the floor instantly. No easing back into it. The band's job was to keep driving the pace.
And the partners were sort of forced against each other, weren't they?
Totally. You had to hold your partner up if they started to collapse. If you let them fall, or if you fell and they couldn't support you, disqualified, both of you.
So you're literally fighting your own exhaustion and your partner's exhaustion, forcing each other to keep going.
Exactly. Demanding they stay awake, stay moving. Yeah. It must have been brutal on relationships.
And the audience wasn't just watching passively.
No way. They were part of the show. Cheering when dancers were finally eliminated, heckling people, shouting demands, like a really sick game show.
And the promoters encouraged this?
Actively. The source talks about hosts making partners slap each other awake for the crowd, dragging collapsed dancers over to ice baths to shock them back into consciousness, all for the audience to see.
God, that's grim. And the humiliation.
It went further. Sometimes dancers had to do basic hygiene, like brushing teeth or shaving, right there in view of everyone, just to save time or maybe just for the spectacle. Dignity was completely gone.
And they threw in other challenges too.
Yeah, these mini games are stunts. Suddenly make everyone do faster steps or jump rope while they're already half dead from exhaustion, or perform silly, humiliating tasks if the audience paid for it.
Paid for it.
Yeah, the tipping. Spectators would throw coins, maybe bills, onto the floor, and these utterly exhausted people would have to scramble and grovel for them.
That's horrible.
Or the audience could pay a couple directly to, say, sing a song or do a specific silly dance move. The source calls it a game of the rich versus the poor. The wealthy literally paying to watch the poor degrade themselves.
And it got so bad it wasn't even really dancing anymore, right?
Right. It became known as the walking marathon. People just shuffling, stumbling around, practically asleep on their feet, just trying to stay upright.
And companies actually sponsored this.
Yep. Logos on their clothes, branding human misery. Chilling, isn't it? An early grim example of that.
The physical toll must have been unbelievable.
Just imagine. Total exhaustion, feet swollen, bleeding, cracked, constantly on the verge of collapse.
That's psychologically.
Profound damage. The source mentions hallucinations were common. They even had a nickname for them, Lucia. Brought on by the sleep deprivation, the stress, deep despair, losing the will to go on.
People must have resorted to desperate measures just to stay awake.
Heartbreaking stuff. Pleading with their partners, don't let me sleep. Asking them to scratch them, pinch them, slap them. Anything to stay conscious.
Were there specific incidents documented, like really bad ones?
Oh, yes. The source recounts some horrifying things. A reported attempted suicide right there on the dance floor. Medical staff stopped it. People vomiting blood.
Oh my God.
And even domestic violence breaking out between couples. The pressure cooker environment. Maybe one partner couldn't take it anymore, wanted to quit, but the other wouldn't let them. knowing it meant losing everything. The food, the shelter, the slim chance of prize money. Fights would break out.
There's a quote from a promoter, Richard English.
Yeah, pretty chilling. He basically said the audiences came to see the suffering. They wanted to see people collapse, drawn by the cruelty, the dehumanization of it all.
And a dancer, June Walker, said something similar.
She did. Described the audience as driven by like a primitive instinct, sadism almost, finding entertainment in watching people degrade themselves. But she also noted, maybe cynically, that the audience saw the contest as the dancers' only hope. Maybe that's how they justified watching.
And people actually died doing this.
Yes. The source highlights the case of Homer M. House. He was 27. Died in 1930 after dancing for 87 hours.
Only 87 hours. That's relatively short compared to some of those times.
Right. Shows how brutal it could be. And the truly awful detail is, when he collapsed, the audience apparently thought it was just part of the act at first. They didn't help.
Jesus.
And the source suggests there were likely other deaths that went unreported, which eventually started to bring more negative attention.
So how did this nightmare finally end? It couldn't go on forever.
No, it faded out. It wasn't just one thing, more like a combination of factors piling up.
Government stepping in.
That was a big one. As the deaths mounted and people got more outraged, states started passing laws in the late 1930s, regulating the hours, demanding better conditions, or just banning them outright as a public safety hazard.
And the venues probably got nervous too.
Exactly. Building owners, cinemas, places like that.
Yeah.
They didn't want the bad press. Didn't want people dying on their premises. The risk became too high.
And entertainment was changing too, right?
Yeah, movies got huge, radio became widespread in the 40s. People had other, less grim ways to escape and be entertained.
And the economy.
Critically, yeah. As the Great Depression slowly started to ease up, the absolute desperation lessened for some people. Fewer were driven purely by the need for food and shelter to endure that kind of thing. The pool of willing participants shrank.
And then World War II.
Right. War starts in 1939. That becomes the massive national focus. Attention, resources, everything shifts away from spectacles like dance marathons.
But the memory, the story, it didn't just disappear.
No, definitely not. It lived on mainly through literature and film, which kind of exposed the dark reality to later generations who maybe couldn't believe it happened.
The big one is they shoot horses, don't they?
Absolutely. The 1935 novel by Horace McCoy, and then that really powerful 1969 film by Sidney Pollack.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. It's brutal.
It really is. It uses the marathon as this incredibly potent metaphor for the hopelessness and the desperate struggle of that whole era. It ends tragically, mirroring so many real stories.
The source also mentioned a Thai novel.
Yeah, Taya, or The Sorrowful Flower. It seems like the theme resonated in other cultures too, exploring that level of desperation and exploitation.
So looking back on it all, these dance marathons were way more than just some weird fad.
Oh, much more. They're this incredibly stark reflection of, well, massive social inequality, the absolute depths of economic despair, but also, in a twisted way, human resilience, right?
Yeah, resilience pushed to a tragic breaking point. And it shows the really dark side of entertainment, what happens when profit and just morbid curiosity take over, the extremes people will endure for survival.
It really makes you think, though. Doesn't it raise a question about today?
How so?
Well, think about the pressures we face now. The constant pressure to perform, to compete, in the job market, social media, striving for success, for validation. Is it, maybe in a different way, still a kind of marathon?
Are we sort of always dancing? Sometimes maybe against our own well-being, our own desires, just to keep up, meet expectations, or just, get by.
What are we maybe sacrificing in our own modern personal marathons? The pace of life, the demands. Maybe it's less physically brutal. Hopefully no one's dropping dead on the job like that. But
the pressure, the endurance aspect,
yeah,
still there, just looks different.
Yeah. It makes you wonder about the cost of what we see as success, or even just the cost of navigating modern life.
Yeah.
How societal pressures still push us, maybe more subtly, but still push us towards our limits.
That's a really sobering thought to end on, pulling that thread from such a haunting piece of history. Wow.
It really stays with you, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive today.
Thanks for having me. It was fascinating, if grim.
Indeed. We'll catch you next time.